Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, we'll be making this oversized fairy sweater. This is a beginner level tutorial with a lot of these repetitive stitches, so let's get right on into it. For materials, you're going to need 550 grams of one weight for yarn and 300 of another, a 5.5mm hook, and some scissors. You can also head to my Instagram for a free written pattern, but the steps are still going to be listed in the video as well. Step 1. You're going to start by making a slip knot. I also recommend you turn up the brightness on your phone or computer so you can get a better look at the darker colored yarn I'm using. Step 2. You're going to create a chain the length of half the circumference of your waist and then add 10 extra to it. So for me, mine was 52 chains and I added 10 more to get 62 total. This method allows to have an oversized sweater without being so gigantic that you're just totally stuck inside. Step 3, you're going to turn your work and skip the last chain that you just made. So if you look at the chain the way you have it set up here, you're going to skip the one I'm pointing at and go into the next. Now you're going to begin half double crocheting all the way down the chains that you made. So you'll end up with 61 total if you followed mine, or just one less than what you made the last time for your chains. This is because you skipped that last thing on your chain. If you've never made a half double crochet before, you're going to yarn over, insert, and then pull through. Then with 3 loops remaining on your hook, pull the yarn through once more, so that way you end up with a thicker stitch than a single crochet. Once you get to the end, make sure you don't skip that last stitch next to your slip knot. It's extremely easy to miss, so just make sure if you feel like you're short one that that's not the one you're skipping. Then you can go back through and count everything. When you're done, you're going to chain 1 and turn your work all the way around. For step 6, you're going to half double crochet once in each stitch all the way down to the end of the row. Make sure that this time around you're not skipping anything, you're just going into the next stitch that is in line with your hook. From there, because we did 61 in the last row, you're going to want to make sure you have 61 half double crochets in this row as well, or whatever that number was for you if you had changed it. Make sure that you count very carefully as you go. And once again, at the end, make sure you don't forget that last stitch. It's super easy to miss, but you will get the hang of it. When you're done, just chain 1 and then repeat these steps 7 more times for 8 total rows. At this point in your project, you should have 8 rows all together. From here, we're going to, instead of chain 1, make a color switch. You will simply just take your second color and pull it straight through rather than chain. You're going to want to make sure you cut the last bit of yarn, so that way as you move down your next row, you can begin to weave in all your ends. From there, just pull everything extremely taut, and you can move on. Simply turn your work, do not chain this time, and half double crochet all the way down, making sure that those 2 little tail ends are squeezed in between each one of your half double crochets. The lighter color stripes are going to have 6 total rows, and the darker colors are going to have 9. You're going to want to repeat this until you have 8 total. This part is super time consuming, but it's all very easy to handle. For step 11, you are going to do 5 more totally normal rows, and in step 12, we're going to begin adding a decrease on every 5th stitch. A decrease is very simply where you insert your hook normally, but then rather than pull out, you go into the stitch behind it as well. So insert it back behind, and then continue your half double crochet the way you normally would. For the following row, you're going to be decreasing on every 3rd stitch, and then you're going to be repeating everything for the next 2 rows afterwards. So 1 decrease 5, 1 decrease 3. For step 14, you're simply going to chain 1 and then cut your yarn, pulling it straight through when you're done. After that, you're just going to want to repeat all of these steps so that way you can make your second panel. We're now going to be moving on to the arm section of this project. Start again with another slip knot, this time chaining enough to wrap around the largest part of your arms. I work out a lot, so for me the number is 40. If you're on the very skinny side, you might go closer to 30. If you're a little bit bigger, you might be closer to 45 or 50. So just keep that in mind as you go, that these numbers can be drastically different. Once you're done with that, you're going to want to lay your chain entirely flat, holding both ends together so you can slip stitch them together with the first and last chain stitches. You want to make sure that those chain faces are on the outside as you do this, and then you want to very carefully slip stitch them together to make sure that it's extremely clean. When you're done, you're just going to chain 1, and then for step 4, you're going to begin half double crocheting all the way around, equal to the amount of chains that you made. So again, for me, this was 40. Be very careful as you go through this part so that way you only have one half double crochet in each one of those chain stitches. This can be a little bit tricky, so just double count them after you're done with your row. And again, make sure that you don't skip the last stitch. They're always really easy to overlook, but you will get the hang of it. For step 5, you're going to want to slip stitch into the first stitch that you made, not the first chain. So if you look at your little piece here, you'll see one loop there. You're going to go into the one above it. That's where your first stitch ends up actually being. Then you're just going to chain 1, and you're going to begin repeating that step all the way around until you have 9 rows of these darker colors. Altogether, you're going to want to repeat the same thing as the top that you made, making a total of 7 rows instead of 9. And of course, make sure that you're going into the right stitch, not the chain as you're going all the way around. One more addendum to this part, when you're doing your color switches for these, you're going to want to start by doing your slip stitch and then cutting your yarn instead of doing a chain. From there, you're just going to do a color switch the same way that you would normally do so. This is done exactly the same way as before, again making sure to weave in your ends as you go. Make sure you really understand this step or you're going to end up losing count of your stitches. One more quick note from me, again please make sure that as you're going through you don't go into the chain in between rows, rather into that first slip stitch that you made. It's a little hard to see during the color stitches, so just take your time. For step 8, you're going to chain 1, cut your yarn and pull it through, repeating all these steps once more for the second sleeve. Then you're just sewing everything together. To sew stuff together, you first want to make sure everything is inside out and then all lined up against each other. You're then going to make a slip knot and head to the very top of the 2 panels, count 7 stitches in, and insert your hook. After you've inserted your hook, you're going to want to attach the slip knot onto your hook, pulling it through and then single crocheting all the way to the corner, so it'll be 7 stitches total. Be careful as you do these to make sure that you're not doing anything extra or your neck won't fit. From there, you're going to chain 1 and insert your hook back into the panel as well as into the top of the sleeves that you made. You're then going to want to make 1 single crochet to connect them, and from there you're going to begin single crocheting all the way around your sleeve to start actually making the foundation of the connection. In total, we're going to be splitting the number of stitches amongst each panel. For example, my sleeve was 40 chains all the way around, so I'm doing 20 chains on the front panel and 20 on the back. So to do this, you're basically just going to move down the panel very slowly, going into 1 stitch at a time as you go. Using a single crochet is stronger than sewing, so nothing will fall apart when you're washing it or when you're out and about. Also important that when you're doing color switches here, you're making sure to weave in all your yarn so that way nothing shows up when you're actually wearing the piece. And of course we want to color stitch in these parts so that way we don't see the stitching on the outside once we flip the whole piece inside out. For step 9, you're simply just going to reach the end, which for me was at 2 stripes in, then cut your yarn and repeat all of these steps to the other half of the sleeve. It is important while you're doing this to make sure that all your ends are weaved in as you go. To attach the other part of the sleeve, make sure you start with the slip knot, since this time we're not going directly from the top of the panels themselves. Just because you want to make sure that nothing ends up looking messy or sticking out from the other side, which is very common. For step 11, you're going to make another slip knot and continue to single crochet all the way down the side of your piece. I personally am going to stop with 2 stripes left because I want that little slit on the sides, but you can basically go from here and single crochet all the way down to the bottom if that's what you'd like. Once you reach the end, whichever spot that may be, you're going to want to cut your yarn, tie it all off, and then begin to weave all of your ends back in. If you had made a bow, simply all you're going to do is make a quick slip knot, chain 100 times, then cut your yarn and even out the ends. These are what we're going to attach to the sleeves in a moment, but the most important part of this in my opinion is making sure that the ends are cut short and even, so that way you don't have to tuck them in to make it look clean. Simply doing it this way looks like they're meant to be there, almost like the aglet of a shoelace does. I simply just line mine up together, just like so with my fingers. I don't measure anything, and then I cut it very easily with a scissor, and I just tie it all together, making little bunny ears and pulling them through. Also, ignore my pajamas, it was really early when I was doing this. but continuing to tie them together, wrap them around both of your hands like so, pull them through, and basically knot it onto itself. From there, you're just going to want to adjust those little bunny loops and pull the strings to make them a little bit longer. Then you want to repeat all of it so you have 2 of them. To attach the bows to the sleeve, you're going to want to start by lining it up wherever you want it, and then just using your hook to sew on the tops and bottoms of both of those little bunny ears. So simply pull it through like I'm doing here. There's no real right or wrong way to do this part, so long as that way you are tying both ears down, or just loops you could say as well. And then as well as making sure that that little tail end is not tucked into anything. You want them to flow loosely, so that way they float around with your hands as you're moving them. To securely attach it all, just tie a few knots and then cut everything to be even. Thank you all so much for watching today's video. If you liked it, here's another one to check out. And you can also head right on over to my Instagram to look at that written pattern I'd mentioned before. I also post tons of other content on there and on here, both with shorts, reels, and more to come. I also have a Depop if you're interested in buying anything. Thank you all so much.